everyone, we're going to go ahead and start. So, can you tell us a little bit about your limb difference and just tell us a little bit of your background and your story?
Yeah, sure. So, my limb difference is congenital. I was born this way. I have my right hand, but not my left. It cuts off right below my elbow. So, like I said, I was born with like this, and I wore a prosthetic up until I was 9, and then when I got to 5th grade, I was like, I'm over it. I can tie my shoes. I can do everything. And when I was going to physical therapy, I remember still having to bead necklaces, and I was like, I'm pretty much beyond this. I think this is not being helpful anymore. So at 9, I stopped wearing it. Um, but other than that, I mean, yeah, it's been a long road of getting to a point where I wore a prosthetic pretty much as soon as I could be fitted for one, up until I was 9, and then from 9 up until pretty much when I got pregnant, I spent all my time covering my arm and wearing long sleeve shirts. But getting pregnant was very liberating because I was like, I'm too hot for this. F everything else, okay? I can't cover up anymore.
So, what reaction do you typically get from people when they meet you for the first time?
Yeah. Um, I think I because I would always cover my arm, people wouldn't notice right away actually. When I was in college, I always remember back to this really fun story of a friend of mine who um, so in college freshman year, I lived on the 3rd floor of the building, and the majority of my friends lived on the 1st floor. And one day, I find out, I actually found this out years later, but one day the entire floor was having this discussion about whether or not I had 2 hands. And my friend was like, she has 2 hands. What are you guys talking about? Like, I handed her a computer and she grabbed it. What, you guys are all, she has 2 hands. And it wasn't until my other friend who I was closer to walked through the living room of the floor and they stopped her and they were like, settle this for us. And she was like, yeah, no, she only has 1 hand. And a mind blown for them. So it was like, that's kind of like the antithesis of, I would say, of how people react. They're like, what?
What are you
Especially
serious?
because I mean, generally I'm not like visibly struggling to like carry things or move my body kind of, and then like I said, I was always wearing long sleeves um until I discovered the 3/4 sleeve, which covers like my arm perfectly.
Yeah,
And then again, it's like people just don't notice. And then once I got pregnant and started, not wearing long sleeves at all, i I think like people, they stare, right? They stare. And little kids are prone to asking questions, which I love, because then it's like I love seeing the parents' reaction or even adults around them, because they're like, it's like taboo to ask, but it's not. It's just, just it's okay.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, what was it like then giving birth in a hospital with a limb difference? Do you feel like it changed your experience at all? Do you think it makes it more difficult for mothers? How was that for you?
Yeah. I don't think that my experience was any different than an abled person. I mean, I have to admit that I don't have many friends who have um, been pregnant and given birth. So I'm and I myself, this is my first child, my first birth. So I don't have anything necessarily to compare it to, but I don't believe that my experience would have been any different otherwise, uh, because I could walk and I could move. And even then I had an epidural, and so I needed assistance to like, to shift anyway, but that didn't necessarily have anything to do with the fact that I only had 1 hand. So yeah, I don't think it made any difference, and certainly not as far as the hospital personnel, treating me. So
And how about from a breastfeeding perspective? Did you have help from a lactation consultant when you were in the hospital? What was that experience like? And how has breastfeeding been with having only one hand?
yeah, challenging, challenging to say the least. But I think actually more so because breastfeeding was so new, but also like getting into the nitty gritty was challenging because I only had 1 hand. So at the hospital, I did see a lactation consultant, but it was very quick. And because my daughter latched on well from the start, I just kind of got like a byline of like, well, if she unlatches, this is how you know, latch her again. Actually, I don't even recall, because it was such a daze, right? I was still coming out of everything. Like, do I even remember the lactation consultant showing me how to properly latch, because my daughter had latched on so well, and I presumably properly already? Like, I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. It was very quick. And
Did
I
they
will
give
say
you
this.
did they give you any strategies or help with figuring out positioning later on, or was it just kind of like you're on your own? Here's
Yeah,
your
it
yeah.
was very quick. She was probably in there, I kid you not, less than 5 minutes. It was very quick. And part of me wonders if it was because I actually ended up staying in the hospital only one night, because I was just ready to go home. I felt totally ready, and you know, baby was fine, and so I ended up leaving the day after instead of 2 days after. And so I wonder if everybody was informed that I was going to be checking out uh, sooner rather than later. And so I wonder if that influenced the quickness of it, or the swiftness of it. But yeah, less than 5 minutes. And uh, I didn't have any questions prepared because I didn't know what I was in for.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to breastfeed, and I was like, I think I was just elated that that it started off so well. You know, I just didn't think about, like, when I thought about going back home, which again just happened very quickly per my choice. Um, I thought that, well, I guess I got the hang of it here. It's going to be quite that simple at home. Right. Yeah. Right. I was confident about that, actually.
So then,
But
what have you found most challenging with breastfeeding? What have you found easy about breastfeeding? And then what has been the most helpful for you that you wish other lactation consultants knew?
yeah. Um, so when I use a nursing pillow, just the big U-shaped pillow, and I wish I had known that I could lay down with my baby and breastfeed her from the get-go. So I was like just painstakingly tired, sitting up, trying to get her to nurse from my right breast, but she preferred the left breast, and so I just gave her the left one, not having been told that I should alternate, right, or that I should try to. And I wish I had known early on that I could have just laid down with her. I didn't figure that out until weeks later, probably like a couple weeks later, because I did actually end up seeing a lactation consultant on week 2 and week 3 of breastfeeding, of, you know, postpartum, and that was extremely helpful, much more helpful, because I had direct questions, and and that's when I, you know, where I learned the belly to belly, and, you know, baby should be facing me, and how to, you know, that pinching shouldn't be, isn't normal, kind of thing. So and what was challenging too is she preferred the left breast, I think, because of the way that I was able to hold her and position her, right? So when she's on my right breast, my dominant hand is like maybe cradling her neck, but the rest of her body isn't quite as snug. So it's like, he's in my cat's tail. um, so I think that definitely set a precedence for that preference. Um, and then again, just like trying to position her on the pillow, and then me trying to figure that out too. So that was definitely challenging as well. Yeah.
So, what advice could you give to lactation consultants in the hospital if they were to have another patient like you, similar to you, that has some kind of physical difference or a limb difference? What would you have liked to have known right away, other than, you know, that you could sideline right away, or maybe in practicing that? What would you have liked to have heard or known right from the beginning of your breastfeeding journey?
Yeah, I think, like, if the lactation consultant doesn't know how, you know, how would they know to address that, and I don't know what, like, what you have access to prior to seeing a patient. So and because I was wearing the hospital gown, again, it's not visible, right? I was covered up. So I think that um, if it's not already a basic thing, it's just kind of asking, are there any specific uh, um, concerns or questions you have that are unique to you, like logistically, like physically, like lying it out? Because I think like when you keep it too general and too theoretical, it's like, I don't know, especially for new time, for first time moms, right?
Yeah,
It's like, we don't know what we're getting into, huh? What am I supposed to be asking? I don't know. So I think just like a byline of that, and like just because I didn't get that byline of like, this is how you properly latch, I can see that, baby latched on really well, and that's great. But this may or may not be what happens, and this is how you can correct it, and these are the, I mean, I wouldn't say do's and don'ts, but like the can do's, right? Lying down and all that. Um, so yeah, so again, specifically to a disability, it's like, you know, unique to you physically, that you have any questions or concerns about.
perfect. And I think the way you phrase that is perfect. I like how you said anything unique to you, because then again, you're focusing on the positive, you're focusing on the abilities of that person instead of just assuming that you're not going to be independent to be able to do that on your own, because obviously you've lived with this your entire life. So you've been able to make those adaptations and you would know those limitations much better than anyone else.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times it's like I myself don't know yet, right? Because it's a first experience for me. So even then, I really wouldn't be able to imagine what it would look like for me. So me with the disability can barely imagine. I wouldn't expect a person who doesn't have the disability to come up with ideas to address that, right?
Perfect.
But I think that's just kind of opening that jar, gets the person with the disability thinking, and connecting the two, right? Because for me, it was, my disability is here and my breastfeeding journey is there, and bridging that or connecting that was, took weeks.
Yeah. That's great. Do you have any other last words of advice or words of wisdom for the lactation consultants out there?
Let me see. I made notes on my phone, so I'm just
Oh,
looking.
perfect.
Um, Oh yeah, I never talked. The pumping never came up, even with the lactation consultant that I met um, in week 2 and week 3 postpartum, and I'm sure it was because at some point I said I wasn't pumping, and then also, like, for me, the bottle was very discouraged, just because of nipple confusion, right? And so I was just never, I wasn't having those conversations with the people around me. And anyway, I knew I wasn't going to introduce a bottle until later, if at all, and I ended up not. So pumping just seemed so far away that by the time I started somewhat pumping, just to catch letdown sometimes, or certainly when I started feeding my daughter like solids and giving her like rice, oatmeal cereal with my breast milk, I just like it was so daunting. I didn't want to do it. That's part of the reason why I didn't pump at all beforehand, was because I just didn't know what I was in for. And I mean, we're living in the 21st century. I have access to the internet, and we've met because I follow you on Instagram, and I did follow a lot of other Instagram accounts. So it's not like I didn't know at all,
Mhm.
but for me, it was just, sometimes you just want to talk through it, and I didn't have that, so I just didn't know what I was in for, and I was like, just another thing I'd rather not have to deal with.
So, have you found, is there something different that you need to do with pumping than you feel like someone with two hands would be able to do? Do you need to use some different adaptive equipment or a pumping bra?
Um, so I never ended up pumping with a machine, just the hand pump.
Gotcha.
And so which is hilarious considering I have one hand. I should use a I in right like I should use a pump, that way I can be hands free, but I don't. I just end up using the hand pump. And um and uh if it weren't for Instagram accounts that I'd followed, I would have never known about flange size and all that. So I wish that had been addressed way sooner. Um so yeah, I mean, in particular tied to my disability, I don't think that um there's, yeah,
You feel like
anything.
you would have had that option to be able to use an electric pump or a hand pump per your own preference, and you feel like your difference doesn't impact that as
Yeah,
much.
exactly.
Basically, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Well, thank you so